Hello, my name is Victoria Duggan, and I'm here to provide an overview of project management lessons learned from a project management professional, which was ascertained during an interview with Jason Biddle, a systems analyst at NC State University. The presentation will begin with an overview of Mr. Biddle's education, as well as his experience, and will include insight into our interview process. We will then move into some core issues and challenges discussed in our interview, including Mr. Biddle's road to project management. Next, we will focus on the reality of Mr. Biddle's experience with scope creep, risk management, communication, and conflict resolutions, as well as the methodologies he uses to handle these project management areas and how it compares with the theoretical literature on these issues and challenges. Finally, we will wrap up with key takeaways and conclusions from the interview. Mr. Biddle is a analyst on the Information Services team within the Advancement Services Department at North Carolina State University. A self-proclaimed leader, experienced in spearheading business transformations through innovative solutions and creative and integrative technologies, Mr. Biddle began his formal education with a Bachelor's of Science in Business Management at SUNY Geneseo in New York before obtaining his MBA focused on finance and information technology at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Mr. Biddle's work at NC State focuses on improving processes where he utilizes data and technology to bring people together across multiple disciplines. His methods are rooted in a shared vision of the future, setting realistic expectations and measurable objectives, and implementing projects and processes based upon common sense approaches. Mr. Biddle and I work closely together on system upgrades, architectural changes to systems and tools, as well as discovery and implementation of new software and tools. Mr. Biddle's main role as a system analyst encompasses many different responsibilities, all of which are employed with effective project management methodologies and practices. While his formal education lacked the project management framework he has garnered through PMI courses and practical experience, he found that both his undergraduate and graduate degrees helped him to appreciate the importance of effective project management when working on group projects and attempting to delegate and organize assignment responsibilities. In his current role in higher education at NC State, he uses project management to focus and facilitate conversations and to complete large software upgrades and implementations effectively, on time, and within budget. My approach for finding a project manager started on LinkedIn, where I reviewed former and current colleagues and ultimately determined that interviewing someone close to my own work would prove beneficial, opening dialogue on how we as colleagues can effectively work together on future projects. As Mr. Biddle's colleague, I work closely with him on many of the projects he manages, both as a subject matter expert and stakeholder, depending on the scope of the projects. I knew that some of the questions could potentially be mutually beneficial if appropriately and diplomatically articulated, and found that during the interview process, I gleaned some of Mr. Biddle's personal preferences for communication and conflict management, as well as his preferred methods for introducing projects. Insight into his preferences and project management style will prove beneficial in future interactions. Mr. Biddle and I determined the safest method for our conversation would be to meet virtually over Zoom, which I easily set up via Google Calendar. The interview lasted longer than expected, as it was a robust conversation which lasted about an hour and a half. We met for the interview from our respective homes and utilized our webcams, which allowed us to see and hear each other, which made for an engaged conversation. The main interview questions asked during the interview were pulled from the set of required questions for the assignment, all of which Mr. Biddle was able to answer at length. I also developed a few additional questions based on conflict management and essential project management skills. This presentation will illustrate the results of our interview and, as mentioned in the overview, provide key takeaways from our discussion. The initial interview questions focused on Mr. Biddle's road to mastering project management and also addressed his prior academic background and how it prepared him for his role as a project manager. Before working at NC State, Mr. Biddle worked as a project manager in various positions in a variety of industries, including higher education, the corporate sector, and technological firms. While recent research shows that incorporating project management into higher education courses increases knowledge, future acceptance, and likelihood of future use of project management, Mr. Biddle's educational background provided no real project management foundations or courses. However, he did learn a basic understanding of what is needed and best avoided in working on group projects in undergraduate and graduate coursework. With little guidance from professors on how best to manage issues related to productivity and equity in work outputs, he found himself taking the lead and picking up the slack on group projects. While responsibility and ownership over project management responsibilities has proven essential for project managers' success in projects, Mr. Biddle's education made him realize the shortcomings of not having engaged partners to assist in workload. Mr. Biddle explained that he thinks having a formal education would have been very helpful in his career. Still, his education, or lack thereof, in project management still helped him to understand the importance of engaged and equitable collaborators in managing projects. A primary objective of this interview was to learn what theories and methodologies Mr. Biddle utilizes in managing his projects. Throughout the course of the interview, I learned that Mr. Biddle doesn't rely on one methodological approach for all his projects, but instead tends to utilize the foundational practices and phases central to the waterfall method and has recently began introducing and leading projects from an agile framework. His thinking on the many methodologies and hybrid approaches to project management is that there will always be new approaches and technologies to discover and utilize in the management of projects. The best methodology for one place of business might not work for another. It is important for the project manager to learn new methodologies and be aware of what is available for managing projects, but equally important is an understanding of the culture and capabilities of a workplace, which will ultimately dictate which approach is best for projects in a current role. Some of the major themes that arose during the interview included project scope creep, the importance of communication and documentation, conflict management, and risk mitigation. Many of these themes resurfaced throughout the interview, and the skills and approaches to mitigating project scope, creep, and risk, in particular, included the effective utilization of all the other themes. One area where Mr. Biddle's practice aligns with the existing theoretical knowledge on project management is scope creep. While we know from project management theory that the ability to manage and control project scope is key to project success, we also know that it is not uncommon for project scope to shift and change. Mr. Biddle has found that one of the primary issues he faces as a project manager is navigating how best to manage and mitigate project scope changes. Some of the ways he prevents project scope change is by documenting the project objectives and end goals early in the planning phase of a project, making sure to note any adjustments, suggestions, or alterations to the planned deliverables or objectives as they arise. His approach to scope changes also align with project management best practices in that he does not definitively reject scope changes, but instead considers feedback and business needs and makes necessary changes to scope based on what is possible without derailing the project timeline and budget. Another major theme that arose during the interview centered on risk mitigation. Again, Mr. Biddle relies heavily on documentation of all resources, expectations, deliverables, and timelines in order to set realistic expectations for sponsors and stakeholders. In line with traditional best practice theory on risk mitigation, Mr. Biddle's approach to documentation starts from the beginning of his projects, where he formally introduces projects in kickoff meetings to stakeholders, subject matter experts, and sponsors. Traditionally, he uses kickoff meetings or introductory meetings as an opportunity for discussion. However, he comes prepared with a detailed PowerPoint or other presentation resource in order to facilitate and guide an educated discussion, which allows participants to leave the meeting with knowledge of what to expect should the project move forward. In many ways, these initial conversations serve to familiarize sponsors and stakeholders with what a project can solve or achieve in the context of their work, which also serves to keep stakeholders and sponsors engaged and interested in the success of the project. Project management theory teaches that projects are more likely to succeed if stakeholders buy into the benefits and necessity of a project. And Mr. Biddle's practice aligns with the traditional theory on stakeholder engagement and the correlation to project success. In line with Agile project management methodology, Mr. Biddle has recently begun to present stakeholders and subject matter experts with early iterations of project deliverables and resources, specifically as it relates to early and continuous delivery of valuable software and what it can offer and potentially improve for stakeholders. His thinking and utilization of an agile approach to projects allows him to deliver working software frequently, incorporating real feedback on business needs in order to determine if scope changes are needed or if the project is still viable. This approach reduces risk by enforcing stakeholder understanding and by reestablishing stakeholder understanding of what the software or tool can realistically accomplish. Mr. Biddle also attempts to identify organizational risks up front, especially when encountering newer projects with unfamiliar software or partners. One approach he takes is to attempt to identify what support the impacted stakeholders will need and to assess their ability to handle or learn a new system or tool. He works to determine what level of training they need, what their comfort with computers and general software is, and what extra support various team members may need in order to ensure project success. Along these lines, he likes to bring stakeholders in early in order to familiarize them with the process and request feedback, incorporating feedback into project adjustments where possible. This serves to make stakeholders feel part of the larger process and assist with project adoption rollout later on in the project phase. In project management theory, communication drives a project and ensures project success. From Mr. Biddle's perspective, strength in communication is the most important skill for a project manager to have, though he feels he struggles with this key skill. As he noted in the interview, as a project manager, he is responsible for communicating effectively at all levels of the organization, including executive leadership, subject matter experts, stakeholders, and departmental leadership. He has learned over the years that each of these groups will have different questions and takeaways based on their role in the organization and their interest and involvement in a project. As a project manager, he has to be prepared to answer those various questions and also be able to present the big picture and still understand and communicate the nuts and bolts of a project for those stakeholders who need and value that perspective. In addition to communicating effectively at all levels of the organization, Mr. Biddle also prepares project plan documents which outline the tasks, resources, and time that is needed to accomplish a project from start to finish in order to accomplish desired results. He also drafts and disseminates what he refers to as a specification document, which can contain programming logic or other technical steps for completing a project and serves as a roadmap for programming for his technical teams and partners. Depending on the type of project, different types of documentation is needed. But from Mr. Biddle's perspective, documentation serves everyone involved in a project as it sets clear expectations and outlines what will be needed from each group in order to accomplish the milestones of a project. Mr. Biddle also sees communication as a key tool for setting and maintaining expectations and aims to keep dialogue open with key stakeholders throughout the duration of a project in order to mitigate potential conflicts and miscommunications. Conflicts can be reduced with effective communication, and from Mr. Biddle's perspective, conflict and miscommunication can often be avoided with effective communication via presentations, executive reports, and status reports. As with risk mitigation and scope creep, sometimes conflict can prove unavoidable. In those situations, Mr. Biddle asserts that it is best to address the issue diplomatically and with an open mind. The key is to open the dialogue and not let the issues fester. From his own words, I'm not afraid to have those conversations if the other person is a little bit more standoffish and doesn't want to. I hope that I can pick up on that. But there's a certain point where I'm going to have to be the bigger person and say, hey, it looks like we may have a disagreement on XYZ. Love to hear why you think XYZ is a good thing. You just have to have those conversations. Existing project management literature positions communication, risk mitigation, and conflict resolution and scope creep at the center of a project manager's key challenges in managing a project, and Mr. Biddle's experience is no different. Depending on the scope and level of intensity of a project, he can at different times serve as the planner, point person, facilitator, aligner, problem solver, coach, or salesperson for a project. In his work at NC State, he sometimes serves in a hybrid role where he is the subject matter expert as well as the project manager. As a project leader and manager, he asserts different skills at different times and adjusts his methodological approach based on the needs of the organization and project. In all of this work, he leverages key skills such as dedication to the end goal, interpersonal communication, adaptability, and organizational attention to detail to ensure he keeps these challenges in check. While there were many valuable takeaways from the interview, as well as significant insight into how best to work on projects with Mr. Biddle in the future, one key takeaway was his assertion that some projects are simply bound to fail. While I have read this in key project management literature, it is still a significant takeaway as a project manager with minimal project experience. I also took note of the fact that while Mr. Biddle has only minimal educational experience with project management, he is still a successful project manager. Formal project management can prove intimidating and can seem impossible without the right certifications. However, there are many ways to garner project management experience, all of which begin with the practical application of project management skills with or without formal training. I also valued hearing that receipt of formal project management education is something to be valued and taken seriously. Mr. Biddle explained that he feels he would have benefited from such formal training. So, if the opportunity arises, as in this course, it is important to take advantage of the opportunity presented. One key issue discovered through the interview process is that project management methodologies are subject to change, and it is important to be open to what methodology and practices best suit the culture and work environment the project is managed within. Not all projects are created equally, and there isn't one project management methodology that will work in every business sector or industry. With a strong appreciation and foundation of project management principles, project management leaders and managers have an opportunity for success. While the methodologies might shift, certain leadership skills will always enable a project manager to succeed. Approaching projects from a leadership position, exhibiting clarity, care, and accountability in communication, and keeping eyes open to risk and necessary change all work together to set a project manager up for project success. Additionally, having the ability to flex and change as needed, incorporate feedback in real time while keeping the larger context and objectives of the project in mind, and communicate limitations and potential risks to manage expectations all work to push a project forward successfully. However, even with the right leadership, budget, and resources, some projects may still fail. Learning from mistakes and being willing to accept failed expectations is key to ensuring the next project starts on better footing. Considering how project management is applied in the field and in the literature this author has reviewed, there are many similarities in Mr. Biddle's experience and the challenges and successes documented in the literature. Specifically, even without formal education, project managers tend to find more success when they utilize effective communication, pay attention and mitigate risk, and identify and manage scope creep. My concern for new and upcoming project managers is that these skills may not prove inherent, and therefore, without adequate training and foundational knowledge in project management, many project managers will experience many failed projects that could be avoided. In line with literature reviewed on project management preparation through higher education, Mr. Biddle considers introductory coursework on project management as invaluable for increasing knowledge, building key skills, and ensuring future acceptance and use of project management best practices. Therefore, if new and upcoming project managers or students have an interest in project management as a career path, they should strive to find a certification or educational program that provides foundational project management knowledge and skills. A career in project management can begin in many different industries with many different educational backgrounds and degree paths. Formal education doesn't always play a role in the training of project managers, but it can be beneficial for navigating the nuances and complexities that arise when managing a project. Successful project management begins and ends with a review of the needed objectives and goals of a project, and is best achieved when a project manager exhibits strong skills in communication, scope management, and mitigation. Mr. Biddle was straightforward about his own perceived shortcomings in managing projects and how he attempts to mitigate those shortcomings by bringing the right people in at the beginning of a project by documenting everything. Throughout his interview, he frequently returned to the idea of including the right people and methodology in managing projects, reflecting that not every project needs 30 people and a traditional project management structure. Each project is different and has different requirements. One constant with all the projects he has successfully managed is that communication and conversations with the right people at the right time is essential in order to achieve success. Thanks for your time, and this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions about this presentation or about Mr. Biddle's role as a project manager, please feel free to reach out to me at vhduggan@ncsu.edu. Again, thank you for your time and attention.